Welcome to this latest edition of the Delivery Profits, brought to you by the Delivery.world, together with Avico Super Crunch, the ultimate fries for delivery. We're so grateful for all of you out there who tune in regularly for this podcast. Without you, we're just a bunch of guys and gals talking to each other in a recording studio. I'm Peter Backman, and today, together with John Borzicchiello and our special guest Will Beckett, as usual, we'll talk about delivery in general and what it might mean for restaurant operators. And no doubt we'll get on to other topics too, as we try to get a deep understanding of the forces shaping this rapidly evolving sector. But before we get on to that, John, in the UK, it's approaching Poppy Day. This is recording the events of the First World War and gives everybody the opportunity to donate a relatively modest but hopefully very helpful amount. And we end up with having a poppy which we stick on our lapels. And it's great to see tens of thousands, probably millions of people with these poppies on, because it reminds us of sacrifice and in a small way helps us to acknowledge all the efforts that have been put into protecting us. What do you think?
I totally agree. Funnily enough, we were talking about it home only last night, Peter, because there is a service in the village where my children go to school on Sunday. So remembrance service, my eldest Charlie is laying a wreath for the school. My youngest, Harry, he is marching with the beavers. So all the scouts, beavers, guides, boys brigade, they all meet up before they walk through the village to the actual remembrance service. I find it amazing, a little village, Wymeswold it is, in the middle of Leicestershire. They read out the roll of honour of the people that died in the war. And there are, I would think, from this little village, a good 50 names they read out every year. And you think to yourself, that's 50 from a little village. If that was now, the impact that must have had on communities back then must have been crazy, to be honest.
Yeah, it's an opportunity to bring people together, sad though the events were at the time.
But great to remember, and I'm glad we still do it.
Good. And with that thought, it's time to get the show on the road. So, as usual, let me set the scene with some thoughts that I prepared earlier. In the Delivery Profits, we generally start with the assumption that delivery is here, and it's here to stay in some form or another. And we've had lots of insightful and informed discussions in the show about what the future of delivery might look like. But delivery is not a given. As a restaurant, you don't have to do it. Sure, there are downsides to not doing it. Lost revenue, loss of bragging rights, not being seen as being up to date with current ideas. All these are examples that have been given to me. But there are also downsides to doing delivery. Reduced profitability, losing connection with your customers, not knowing who they are, disruption in the restaurant. We've talked about all of these and other downsides too. And we've then moved on to discussions about ways to mitigate those downsides. In other words, we've assumed that delivery is what a restaurant does. But here's a question though. What if you accept the downsides in delivery and you decide to forego the upsides? How much does it matter if you don't do delivery? To what extent does not doing delivery restrict your options? And are any of these real or relevant? In other words, do you really have to do delivery? John, when you're dealing with your clients, is that an assumption that you make?
We have different discussions with different customers around delivery. Some of the customers see delivery as a huge growth for them. They've grown with delivery over the last few years. Some of them see it as a distraction where they have their operation, they have their sites, they have their experience, and what they do in those works. And delivery doesn't work. There's just something seems to be missing from it. Yes, it's additional revenue. Yes, it can be growth, but there's still that little section somewhere missing. Can I put my finger on it? No. And we've discussed this, Peter. What is that little missing bit? And we'll talk about it today, I'm sure. But the experience piece, as we sit here at Brewdog Waterloo and they've got the Christmas tree out there, and we spoke about it, Tim, who does all our sound, said, it seemed like 2 months ago since we seen this tree. If you're sat at home or in an office having delivery, you don't get that. You don't get to see this tree that, 20 foot high in the middle of the bar in Waterloo. The glitter ball, the Christmas lights, it's not there in delivery. And is that the piece that is always going to be missing?
So you're suggesting Christmas trees?
Christmas trees by delivery, maybe B&Q for the people for those.
Great.
There are other trade people out there as well.
Great idea. Good. So I think it's probably time to bring in our guest, who is Will Beckett. Will is the co-founder and CEO of Hawksmoor, the renowned steak restaurant chain, although I'm not sure if I'm allowed to call it a chain, in the UK and the US. So, Will, it's great to have you on the show.
Hi.
John and I have been chatting for the last couple of minutes. Is there anything that we've said that you want to pick up on, or shall we start off with another question?
We can start wherever you like. I think it was interesting just to hear John talk now about experience, and you were talking earlier about kind of the forces that shape a rapidly evolving industry. And I mean, obviously, we're going to talk about the fact that we don't do delivery, but I think there's no doubt at all that delivery has changed the industry for people like us as well. And I think probably you put your finger on it there with sort of the idea of doing something experiential. I think we're aware that people want a more experiential time when they go to restaurants than perhaps they're used to, because the convenience aspect of restaurants has been somewhat cannibalized, hasn't it, by the preponderance of delivery options. So I think that even if delivery exists and we're not part of it, it has still shaped how we think about restaurants.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Quite a lot of the work that I do with restaurant operators sort of centers around the fact that, do people go to a restaurant to eat food? Well, yes, they do. But you can easily eat food at home, so you don't need to go to a restaurant. So it's that other bit that you're paying a lot of money for, comparatively a lot of money for, that's the important bit. And that can go under the heading of experience, I guess.
Yeah.
So that, in a way, that is the essence of what a restaurant is. If it doesn't provide the experience, it's not a restaurant.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to that. I mean, the convenience part hasn't completely gone away, right? I mean, even in a restaurant that is non-experiential, and by the way, you can plenty of countries you can go to where restaurants are not experiential. They still do something convenient. You've still got the whole, people are cooking for you, they're washing up for you. Meals can be quite cheap in certain restaurants. That aspect of restaurants does still exist. It's still valid. I think for restaurants like ours, where we think a lot about specialness, if you like, that would be a word that we think about for customers and actually for the people that work with us. I think it's very difficult to recreate specialness through delivery. And I think we feel that there's a purpose for us there.
Yeah, an observation on that is experience is probably the wrong word, because it implies fireworks and great fun and lots of things happening, when in fact it can be a very, very quiet, understated thing. It's just somebody pays attention to the fact that your glass needs filling.
Yeah, people taking care of you is an experience.
Yes,
that you are unlikely to get with delivery. To me, it's something that's at the heart of restaurants.
When you think about it, Will, Peter, at home, we used to have dinner parties. We used to have friends round. You'd cook dinner, you'd have nice wine, but that would be done. That would be going to a supermarket, to the local butchers, to the market, getting all your ingredients and cooking. And like you say, you have the nice one. It's a Saturday evening. You're all sat at home because maybe the children are there. People are now ordering in. Has that dinner party element gone? Because that was an experience at home created by a couple, a family. Whereas exactly what you say with Hawksmoor, it's created by your team. It's created as that special moment where someone can go to celebrate. They can go on a date night there. There's 100 things they go for, and it is a real special place to go, rather than just going, hey, Deliveroo, I'm going to go for X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about that quite a lot, actually, because we did do a version of delivery. We did meal kits during COVID. You would get a box, and with the box came a steak that you would need to cook yourself. But there'd also be a bunch of things that we had already essentially pre-cooked, and you would heat up, bottle of wine, some cocktails. Maybe you had a book in there, some nice instructions, and a playlist. And during COVID, when you couldn't go to restaurants, all those moments that you described, a birthday, an anniversary, when it was allowed, someone coming to your house, something special was possible. In fact, not only possible, it was so deeply missed. So many people wrote to us to say that actually Hawksmoor meal kits were a highlight of lockdowns for them, or the period when restaurants were closed. But then as things progressed and people came back to restaurants, there's still something very special about them, that even in what you're describing, I mean, we have the occasional dinner party, or go to the occasional dinner party, although no one's calling it a dinner party anymore.
Changed totally.
We've gone to someone's house for dinner with other people. And for the most part, I think people cook. But I think one of the reasons is there isn't really much of a delta, I find, when you're trying to order restaurant quality food at home between the price you pay at home and the price you pay in a restaurant. And so there is still something to decide, isn't there, about whether the convenience aspect is, I always think convenience is really about centering yourself. Here's me, often with my phone. I just want things to come to me wherever I am at a time of my choosing, almost the instant that I want it. And a restaurant, obviously, you have to center the restaurant. There are pros and cons, but price isn't really one of them anymore. I find often you're paying the same price for restaurant food at home as you are in a restaurant. I think for me, that's why it hasn't quite replaced kind of dinner party type things or going to restaurants.
You use the word convenience and you've defined it. And I guess we generally have the same issue with convenience as we do with experience, because it covers such a broad range of expectations of practice and so on, that just using it is often not very helpful, because somebody uses the word convenience, the listener makes assumptions about it, and they go off and ignore 90% of what they could be talking about. In a way, we need to be quite clear about what we mean when we're using these terms in terms of delivery. So I'm not criticizing what you say, because you defined it very, very carefully. But I think convenience and experience, which are used in connection with delivery, actually need to be sorted before you can actually make decisions about it.
I think maybe a better word for me, or one that we think about quite a lot in terms of restaurants, home dining and delivery, is hospitality. Lots of the aspects of service can be recreated, right? Service being the things that are done in a restaurant to get food to your table. It's the mechanics of how people look after you. It's whether the tables are cleaned and all of that sort of thing. Hospitality is how you're made to feel while all of that happens. It's such an important part of Hawksmoor. I think it's such an important part of our industry. I mean, which is literally named the hospitality industry, but it is almost completely removed from delivery. I mean, by the way, the convenience aspect is so overwhelmingly delivered on that people are making that trade-off consciously. But I think we felt that with the COVID boxes that we did, there was an aspect of hospitality. There was a human warmth with it and a generosity of caring how the recipients felt. And by the way, also, we were talking earlier, if things went wrong, we would deal with those things because it was just us directly with the customer. Those things, I think, those aspects of hospitality are so important. And now I think we would really struggle to deliver that in a meaningful way. You know, if there's a third-party app and things went wrong, and I've had this experience. Yeah, I know the price coming off the bill or having to email someone, it's just not for me. And I say that as a restaurateur more. I want to be able to have that relationship with a customer and deliver hospitality, and I'd find it difficult.
It comes back, Peter, to that point we've discussed many a time, who owns the customer. Is it the aggregator or is it the restaurateur? And again, from what you're saying, well, it's the aggregator, because there's the email piece, there's the phone call, there's going on to the app. If something isn't right, we live in a complaint culture nowadays as well. And when we talk and we've spoke to other operators, there are lots of complaints around delivery because it's easy to do. It's easy to say my fries were cold. I'll click on the app and I'll get a refund.
It's easy to do, but I think probably, I don't know, I tend to think if someone makes a complaint, it's honest. You know, I don't think people are complaining for the most part in order to kind of get something for nothing or whatever. I think those things are honest. And we've all had delivery experiences. I mean, I don't do a lot of delivery, but we do it. We've all had delivery experiences that have felt subpar, below what any brand owner's expectations ought to be. And I think for somewhere like Hawksmoor, you don't really get a lot of chances. If you fail to meet someone's expectations, which I hope we set really high, if you fail to meet them, I think you lose something quite profound with that customer. Whereas, to be honest with you, if I order a pizza from the local pizza chain, for the most part, my expectations are relatively low, but they are met every single time. It is really consistent. A bit similar to, go to McDonald's. McDonald's aren't setting your expectations high, but they hit your expectation almost every single time. That consistency is really, really important. But I think the more high end, if you like, the product, the greater that risk of under-delivering on expectations.
Definitely. And, Will, I'm going to put my consumer hat on this time now. And as a visitor to Hawksmoor, I would not order delivery if you did it, because the whole element, again, from walking through those doors at Eyre Street, being greeted, up the stairs for a drink in the bar, into the restaurant, good quality food, good quality steaks that are cooked to perfection, the sides that go with them, the experience, like Peter said, the staff topping up your drinks, the experience of the sommelier coming over and saying, these are the wines we have that fit. It fits, so you are a premium offering. And to go to the delivery, one, personally, I wouldn't use it because, like you say, you know what you're getting from a local pizza. You know what you get from Hawksmoor. It's one of those restaurants. And there's a number of those restaurants that have the experience that delivery doesn't have room for them in its current format. For me,
something nice earlier as well before we started recording about Hawksmoor, which was you like to take people there.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it's one of the nicest compliments you can give a restaurateur, because what you're really saying is, I trust you a little bit with my own personal reputation. Because if you take someone, well, it doesn't matter whether it's a client, a date, anyone, but friends you've known all your life, somewhere on your recommendation, and it's not good, it really affects you as much as it affects the restaurant. It affects you, and if you can say that about a restaurant, which I hope a lot of people do for Hawksmoor, I think it's really meaningful. And I can't imagine really how you would recreate something like that with delivery.
If I can, I think we've come to a useful point, because we've actually talked about experience, what it means to actually be there and to be subject, if I can use the word, to hospitality. So on that basis, I'd just like to say a few words, and then we can perhaps go off in a slightly different direction. And what I'd say here is that if you're enjoying the show, please consider supporting us by leaving a 5-star rating on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. Your ratings and reviews mean the world to us and help more people discover our content. Plus, it's the best way to show your appreciation for the hard work that the Delivery.World team, the Avico team, and our fabulous guests put into each and every episode. So go ahead, hit that 5-star button. There are full instructions in the show notes. And let's continue with today's fantastic episode. Will, the point that I think you've very well made, with a little bit of help from John and me, is about the importance of experience. But I'd just like to sort of go back in time slightly. Just before COVID, were you thinking of doing delivery? Then COVID struck and you talked about what you did then. So just a few words about that would be interesting, because I think it helps set the context for where Hawksmoor have gone since then.
So before COVID, we didn't do it. In fact, there is a kind of a small example of us trying to do it. There was a when we only had one restaurant, first one, which is in Shoreditch. There was a local office that would place an order of, at the time, quite a significant amount, so I don't know, 500-600 quid. And they do it once or twice a week. And you just cook some steak, we're only around the corner, bring them over, And in the end, at a time when actually I think it was quite difficult for us to turn down the money, we decided to stop doing it, because I think that's what we realised. We realised we just weren't delivering something that we were really happy with. And in the end, I think we kind of thought, what's the point? And at that time, one restaurant in Shoreditch, this was probably kind of midweek lunchtime, that was doing for us something that I think is really important for delivery generally for restaurants, which is when you have inefficient use of your existing space, right? The kitchens aren't busy enough. The people that you have aren't busy enough. Do delivery. Actually, for the most part now, and as we went back through COVID, we did these Hawksmoor at Home kits, and then restaurants reopened. That was an inflection point for us, that we kind of thought actually the sales were diminishing. But also that idea of having inefficient space or inefficient people that didn't have stuff to do. I mean, it was the opposite. We could barely cope with the volume of customers that wanted to come in. You'll remember at that time there was a recruitment crisis in the industry, but also everybody was building teams not quite from scratch. We maintained a lot of people, but you were hiring a lot of new people who had never worked in the industry before. So the idea that they can deal with all of these customers, but also that we could be doing these other things, wasn't right for us. But I have seen, I live in Southeast London, in my local high street, there are still restaurants that are quite inefficient in terms of use of space all the time. I think it's a really, really good idea for them. But for us, it hasn't really kind of ticked the box of economics either, as well as the brand box.
So I keep coming back to the word experience, having said earlier that it means all sorts of different things to different people. But that is an underlying reason why you're not doing delivery at the moment. I think that's right. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that's what you've said.
Yeah.
If you take another friend of the show, which is Dishoom, they do delivery and they do it fantastically well. And I would suggest that a big difference is that their products work well in delivery, whereas your products are probably more difficult to make work well in delivery. So aside from the experience, it seems to me the product may also be an important consideration.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple. I mean, Dishoom, without any doubt, brilliant. Right? And I've ordered that at home, and it is a brand experience. It's consistent with their brand. To me, it's one of the most interesting areas of delivery, which is, let's call it Indian for the sake of argument, but Ambassador's General Stores do it, Akhtar Islam in Birmingham's doing it, something that is elevated from the kind of the traditional Indian takeaway kind of delivery. And I think it's really, really interesting. But I still think, and I suspect Shamal Kavi would agree, that the in-home Dishoom experience, good though it is not delivering the same magic that the Dishoom experience offers in the restaurant. Including, by the way, I've got favourite dishes at Dishoom that I can't get if I go on delivery. And somehow those things are so intrinsic to me for Dishoom. They do a good job. I like the people who are sort of pushing boundaries with delivery to see what is possible. What will customers pay? What kind of brand experience is relevant?
We've discussed Dishoom a lot on the show because they do offer an experience at home, but you've just hit the nail perfectly on the head of it's not the same as going to a restaurant. You haven't got the wallers running around at home. You have in the restaurant, and that's all part of it, how they describe their people, their culture. The whole Dishoom culture is there. The food, to get those lamb chops on your table as they've been cooked out the tandoor, you can't even get them. Exactly, you can't even get them at home. The best thing you can get at home is the dal, of course, but you get that inside as well, and it's just not the same. But actually, if you are that couple that have just had the baby, or you can't get out and you can order it into your house, what perfect. It will never replace their business. And
also, if they called it something else, I'm not going to try and pick another word, but if they called it something else and just trying to have a kind of a sub-brand, something by Dishoom, I don't think it would work in the same way as well. That brand is such a great one that it does resonate through to that kind of that experience.
So this is the challenge then. So you order the product because it's got Dishoom on the website, or it's got Hawksmoor on the website, and that's what draws you into it. But when you have the product delivered, it's something that's different. So that becomes the challenge and possibly an opportunity. But there is a dichotomy between what you're ordering and what you get.
Yeah.
In simple terms.
Yeah. I mean, I'm part of a business that is doing something similar in terms of trying to bring a brand experience to your home. So I don't know whether you've been to Rockfish. There are a bunch of seafood restaurants in the southwest. Some of my absolute favourite restaurants. They've got a virtuals fishmongers. So you can buy the exact same seafood straight from Bricks and Fish Market. You have it delivered to your home. Packaging's great, all of that stuff. And you can buy sauces and you cook it all together. Even with that, which I think is brilliant, and I suspect with Dishoom, there are brand aspects available to you via QR codes, or if you had a problem or whatever, that you probably assume don't exist and therefore don't quite access. I'm quite often stunned by, oh my God, but there's this amazing part of the deal that no one ever seems to pick up or notice or use. I think we are so accustomed to delivery being just, in inverted commas, convenience, that we don't look for the extra bits where hospitality might be available to us.
It's interesting. Again, you say that we're going lots of different shooting around today, but we had Jamie Barber on one of our first shows we did, and who's got My Superhero. And what he's doing is the kits, like you guys did, and you deliver. And I've had a couple from there, and we've had the Côte de Boeuf, and it comes where it's been sous vide, and all the sauces come, the veg. So you're cooking that at home. So you're doing the element with all the instructions and all the nice menus to go with it. But that's also delivery of hospitality, isn't it?
Yes.
We're creating that as a kit that a brand is offering because they can't do it as a convenience delivery, let's call it a Deliveroo and an Uber. It's another element. Aston Kutcher's just started it from his restaurant, where you get a kit come again, and even if it's just warming that kit up, it's a restaurant meal at home, not a restaurant experience at home. And
I think that thing of a restaurant meal at home, I don't think Hawksmoor could do it, because we couldn't do it with our core product, and the products that lend themselves most easily to it are not what we do. But is that sort of one dish feed a family restaurant quality meal, from a local restaurant. My wife's from Menorca. There's a local restaurant that will deliver a paella dish of any size that you want, 16 if you want. Amazing paella, yeah. Then at the end, just drop the dish back whenever you want it. But, they're not delivering in those kind of, tin packets, etc. It's a dish. It feels generous and restauranty. And because there's that element of trust involved, it feels really meaningful. We've always thought, wouldn't it be great to do a family-sized pie or a family-sized stew? People could just come, pick up, bring back to you. But the truth is, I just don't know whether you can ever really do it in big enough volume for that to feel like a good business decision.
Or is that a different cultural thing? So in Menorca, in Spain, that sort of thing happens because you know the local restaurant knows you, everybody's associated with it. It's fine. In the UK, in a sense, we have a more transactional relationship with our restaurants in that we feel that they are there to serve us rather than that we're part of a larger environment. So I can see exactly why it happens in Menorca. I can see why it may happen in perhaps a small village in the UK. But as a mass phenomenon, I think it's probably quite a problematic idea.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, although the transactional thing, I often think that the US is probably even a step further in terms of being transactional than we are and more convenience-led and where you center yourself. But actually in places like Manhattan, so densely built up, this does actually exist as well. This idea that you go to your local restaurant and buy, a huge, delicious pot of pasta and you would bring it back. Maybe you do get it packaged up. That idea that restaurants serve homes in a place like that does exist in quite a transactional culture. So I'm not sure if it's... I think really it's for small local restaurants, isn't it? It's for places that are in the heart of their communities. It's not for brands or big businesses because the bang isn't really worth the buck.
So this is another thing alongside experience. So one reason is experience. One reason I go to a restaurant is experience, and another one is community stroke neighborhood, which might hold clues for companies that want to get into or want to do delivery in a different way, I suspect. I don't know.
There's a bold statement here, Peter, is from what we've said today around all of the experience, the restaurant meals at home, is the businesses that are benefiting from food delivery are the classic QSRs, the Pizza Hut, the Domino's, the Popeyes, the Macs. That's what these guys are geared up for. This is fast food. As soon as there's operational complexity, as soon as the food doesn't travel well, what operators are trying to do, or seemingly trying to do, is find a solution for a problem that actually doesn't need solving because they're great operators in restaurants.
I think that's a fair comment, actually. If you're a restaurant, ask yourself, am I actually solving a problem with delivery or am I just causing more? And you're absolutely right. On the spectrum from QSR right through to premium steakhouse, delivery works better at the transactional QSR level, absolutely. But that's not a reason for people at the other end to say, actually, delivery does have a role for us, but the constraints are more significant.
Can I ask you a question? I guess my question is, we've talked a bit about transactional versus, let's say, community or hospitality, that kind of additional benefit that we're trying to feel around for. I think there is a role for non-QSR restaurants with delivery, as long as they can answer that question, to whose benefit is this? How is it to the customer's benefit? How is it to their benefit? The missing piece, I think, is the benefit for the people who work in that system. I hope Hawksmoor is quite progressive, quite well regarded in the way we think about employing people. And I think we show some of those things that we've talked about: hospitality, senses of community, specialness. We deliver that for the people that work for us as well. Are all delivery jobs essentially transactional? And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. There's huge amounts of societal value for transactional work, especially if it's reasonably well remunerated. Are there examples of delivery work where actually it does go further? There is more to it than that kind of transactional, I work, you pay me money kind of.
Well, it's a good question, because the rider seems to be a very transactional relationship. However, I had a delivery the other day from a rider who's delivered to me 3 or 4 times, representing different restaurants. So I've got a little relationship with the rider now. I guess the guys beavering away in a ghost kitchen don't see anything other than the next order coming through. They may feel that they're doing a hospitality type job, or they may just feel that they're just cooking the food. So I guess it probably depends on who you are, what you're doing, and all that sort of thing.
I suspect it must be possible, by the way. I mean, if you work in a ghost kitchen and you work in what I would call let's call it a restaurant kitchen. I was going to call it a real kitchen. They're both real kitchens. In a restaurant kitchen, the truth is, for chefs, actually, they don't step out into the nicely designed restaurant that much at all. Like, they might arrive and leave through it, but
Unless,
for the most part,
unless they're the owner, proprietor.
Sure, the majority of chefs. But, so is that a meaningfully different environment? So you ought to think that they could be treated with the same kind of dignity and have that kind of extra value as a restaurant chef. Here in London, there's a brand called Yard Sale Pizza. I don't know whether you've had them on.
We haven't had them on, but I know Yard Sale.
I think I'm right in saying they employ all their own drivers. I'm sure they're not the only ones, by the way, but that must have been part of their thinking, I assume, that they want more than a transactional relationship with either an aggregator or a member of staff, that they want to own those relationships and do more than just, we pay you, you work.
We had Richie on from Buns at Home a few episodes ago. Cherie was big about they write a message on their boxes that what they want to do is they want to create the relationship between Buns at Home and that, let's call it end user customer, rather than that aggregator owning it. And there's no way they want to send the messaging they want to. There's lots of things they would like to do, and Cherie and the team would like to do, but the aggregator still sits in the middle. And that's when I said to Peter earlier of who owns this customer. And that's where, how do you get from what you were saying, the transitional part to that relationship?
Can I butt in here? I've got the clock, you haven't, and we're getting to the point where we've actually got to wrap up. I think we've actually answered quite a few very important questions, or Will has. So thank you very much. Is there anything else, Will, though, out of the general discussion we're having that you think is important to say?
Well, I mean, now you said we're out of time, you see. I was just going to bring it all together in a way that just encapsulated the whole thing neatly and solved all the questions. But we don't have time for that now, unfortunately.
That's why you're on the show.
I don't think I've got anything to say.
Okay. I mean, I think it's been incredibly insightful. And anybody who's doing delivery, whether it's McDonald's or your local pizza place or whatever, should be addressing these sort of questions. So thank you very much. So, Will, we could probably go on for another 2 hours in this way. But if people want to contact you, is there somewhere that you're happy for them to do that?
I mean, I'm often lurking on the Hawksmoor Twitter account, actually. So if you end up DMing at Hawksmoor Restaurants on Twitter, that will come to me as often as not. Great. And if anybody wants to know more about Hawksmoor, whether they're based in the UK or the US or anywhere else? I'm going to say with some confidence that we're the Hawksmoor.com everywhere, but when we've got restaurants in the US and Chicago and Dublin now. So I'm not 100% confident that's true, but I'm pretty sure that's the place to start.
Okay, fine. If there was an asterisk option when you're searching on Google, that's what you'd put in.
Yeah, you just
type
Hawksmoor into Google and it's us or an English Baroque architect.
Okay, so thank you. So a big thank you to our fantastic guest, Will Beckett, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. So thank you. And another thank you this time to Avico Super Crunch, the ultimate fries for delivery, without whose enthusiastic support this show wouldn't get on the air. And here's a reminder that whether you're a delivery company, a marketplace app, a technology company, a restaurant owner, an investor, or simply someone who loves to order takeout, the Delivery Profits is the perfect way to stay informed and ahead of the curve in the world of food delivery. You'll find the Delivery Profits on Spotify, Apple, or on the other places where you normally get your podcasts. And please support this show by leaving a 5-star rating. Your ratings and reviews help more people discover our content. And there's more at www.thedelivery.worlds/The Delivery Profits. Tune in to the next edition of the Delivery Profits for the insights, interviews and analysis that will keep you ahead of the game in this exciting and ever-evolving industry. And with that, it's goodbye from today's Delivery Profits. That's Will and John and me. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Goodbye.
Bye.